So Andres, you are next.
All right. Hi, Tom. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. So, so my question is, in your opinion, what would be the optimal way to balance helping others and taking care of yourself, of ourselves in our life? And by taking care of ourselves, I mean being healthy, having a successful professional career, and earning money, etc.
Well, you know, you need to do both, right? You need to help others, but you also have to grow up yourself. The amount of attention you put on either one of those things kind of depends on where you are in that growth. Early on, you mostly need to put attention on yourself growing up. Because until you've grown up some, it's really hard for you to help others very much. So in the beginning, you want to focus mainly on your own fear, getting rid of it, your own beliefs, getting rid of them, your own ego, getting rid of it. So that's where you focus most of your energy. But as you gain on some of those things, as you get less fear, then you're more able to help other people. So as you grow up, there's just a natural shift between you focus mostly on you and mostly on others. Okay, so yes, you can grow up in any kind of situation. You know, it's not like you have to sell your house, give away all your possessions, go out into the woods, you know, and live in a little cabin. That doesn't really help you grow up. You can grow up in any situation. You know, if you have a good job and you have a good salary and you live in a nice place, you can grow up with a good job and a nice salary and a nice place. You know, it's not like that is a problem. It's only a problem if you let it be a problem. If your main point in life is not to grow up, but to collect more money, then that is a problem, you see. But if your main idea is to grow up, and at the same time, for whatever reason, you also are collecting more money, well, then that's fine. See, it's just you're growing up and collecting money at the same time, then collecting money is not a bad thing. It just depends on where you put it in your realm of values. You know, if you value relationships more than money, that's good. That's better. But it doesn't mean that you can't make a lot of money and still value relationships. You can. So you see, it's not an either or. It's not like you could have to do it this way or have to do it that way. Always will work. It just depends on you. There's a little story that is a Sufi story, and I'll shorten it to just about a minute, Vanessa. So don't grimace. And that is that there was a guru, and he had a lot of devotees, and he was a very highly evolved person. And he took all of his disciples one day to meet his guru, the guy who trained him, and who he told his disciples was much greater than him as far as his quality went. And he took all his disciples to this very wealthy person's house, and they went inside, and all his disciples were thinking, well, the master must work there, you know, must do something there, or maybe he's a teacher there or something. But they found out that the head of the household, the man who owned that lovely house and all those servants and whatever, was the master. So they asked, when they finally had a wonderful meal and whatever and left, and the disciples said, how come, master, that we have to live in poverty, that we have to beg for alms in order to eat, and your master lives in a mansion with servants? And the master told them, he says, well, that's because he cares nothing for wealth. And we have to work in poverty because we care nothing for poverty. So in other words, his ego was not wrapped around his wealth. And if they had wealth, it would probably be a problem. Their ego would get wrapped around it because they weren't that grown up yet. but they had no attachment. They had no ego attachment to poverty, which is why beginning, monks start with poverty, because it's hard to form an attachment to poverty. So it puts you in a space where you're likely to be more successful. Your ego isn't going to grow so fast because you're in poverty, and therefore you have a lot of humility, and those are good things, but they're also not big challenges. You see, it's a much bigger challenge to live, to have opulence or a lot of resources, and to not let that affect your ego, not let that affect your choices. Your choices are still about people. It's still about love. It's still about caring. So it's an interesting Sufi story to let you know that if you have no attachment to wealth, then wealth is not a problem. And because almost nobody has an attachment to poverty, then poverty is seen as a way to accelerate your growth, you see, because it makes it difficult for you to attach to things with your ego. It's hard to be egotistical when you have to beg, go around begging to get something to eat. That's hard on the ego. So that makes that a place where a lot of seekers start, because it's easier. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but that's how these things kind of connect with each other.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yes, thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. It was more like 3 minutes, but it was a good story. It was worth it. Nat, you're up now.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Tom. Happy birthday. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. I wanted to, it should be not very long question. This year, the system put me in contact not only with your theory, but also with another theory or kind of knowledge. I used to believe that the people who were into astrology were sad, naive people that didn't know better, and this is not. And this year I've been finding out many beliefs I have, and now I don't believe that anymore. I have different beliefs, and I wanted to know if you know, or what is the value that you find in the human design knowledge, which if you haven't heard of it, it's like the combination somehow of Western astrology, Eastern astrology, the Kabbalah of the Judaism, the Indian chakra system, the Chinese I Ching, and quantum physics, somehow DNA. It's like a combination, and then it gives you, in my opinion, some tools to know a little bit more about what is your being. So when you talk about the being level, this is like the science of differentiation. So it talks about how we are all different and in which way we are similar in these differences, somehow of how energy flows in your body. And so I found a little bit of value into it. Well, actually, for me, a lot for now. But and also I related with what you speak, in which, in the sense of which you say we have to be more authentic, right? We have to grow up and be ourselves. So this tool comes and shows me, okay, so this is part of how yourself works. And for me, it has made a lot of sense recently. So I wanted to know what's your take on that, and also as this being one of the tools that the system could use to reutilize components for personality. I've heard you said that before, so it makes sense that we don't just, the system doesn't create a new being out of nowhere with everything. So it reutilizes this traits, you could say. Because when I told, for instance, my brother, oh, but how does it have to, how would the date and the exact time of your birth and the place you were born have anything to do with anything? And he doesn't understand that. My intuition tells me that somehow it makes sense, and I wanted to hear your takes on that.
Okay. Well, that was a whole lot. You got a whole lot of questions in there. You noticed that, didn't you, Vanessa? She got a whole lot of questions in there. So
Yeah,
it may make me just a little longer, but we'll go till we work off all those hands that are up. Okay. In a, in an abstract, a very abstract space, things are very simple. And that is, you are consciousness. You evolve by making good choices. That lowers your entropy and gives you a higher quality of consciousness. And that's your whole purpose for being here. So period. It's just very simple that things work that way. But now that's in a very abstract space. Most people have trouble learning in an abstract space. It's very difficult. They need something more concrete, things that they can think about, things that kind of make the problem simpler, but at the same time, more hands-on, more whatever. So people have made up tools, and you did use the word tools a lot. Things like chakras are tools. Okay, and many of the other things that you've mentioned are tools to help us understand. And astrology is a tool. Throwing the chicken bones and seeing how they land and projecting the, forecasting the future because of it, it's another tool. Reading tea leaves are tools. So we have lots of tools that people use to help them grow up, make better choices, understand the larger reality. But these are just tools. They're not really fundamental. There are really no such things as chakras. They don't exist as fundamental objects or fundamental functions, but they do exist as tools. Oh, let's break it up like this. And let's put this in this part of the body and that one in that part of the body. And we get all 7 of them down the line here, down the spine and part of your body, and give them attributes and things that each one does and how you have to develop each one in a positive way and not develop it in a negative way. And it gives people something to work with. It breaks the problem down into pieces that they can handle and that they can deal with. Because if you say, all right, what's the big picture? What's life about? Oh, that's simple. Grow up. Well, that's too abstract. People will have a hard time dealing with that as an abstraction, even though that's a pretty good summary of, the way life is. Stuff happens and you get to deal with it. And by the quality of your choices, you grow up. Most people can't work with that. They need to have a more concrete system to work with. So we make up lots of systems that we can work with. And that's good because each system appeals to different people. And as you go through and interact with these different systems, they'll either resonate with you and you'll get a lot out of it, or they won't. The stuff that resonates with you, use it. If you feel like you're growing with it, you're learning from it, you're becoming a better person with it, then use it. And the stuff that doesn't resonate with you, leave it alone. Don't bother with it. That's how you should grow up. So it's not so much about, oh, is this particular thing, true and wonderful and fundamental? May or may not be, but does it help you grow up? That's a more important question. You see, so take the things that work for you and help you grow up and use those things. And don't be afraid later to let them go. Because as you grow up, the things that are helpful to you for growing up more change. So there may be a part of your growth where chakras are just what you needed. And there'll be another point past that where chakras are just irrelevant. They're not necessary anymore. They're just not part of your growth path. You don't need them anymore. You don't have to slice and dice things that way in order to work with them. So put your arms around them and engage them when they're helpful and just let them go when they're not. So yes, there are correlations to these things and there's reasons behind all of them, So you talk about astrology and you said that you used to think that was just kind of a stupid idea. What could your date and place of birth and time really have anything to do with anything? That just didn't make any sense. And then you said that you let go of that idea, but now you have new ideas. You replaced, or new beliefs is what you said. You said, I got rid of those beliefs, but now I got new beliefs. Well, the idea is to get rid of all your beliefs, not just to replace old ones with new ones. It's to get rid of your beliefs. But in the process of getting rid of beliefs, you may some replace old ones with new ones until you can get rid of the new ones. But in any case, yes, there is a thing about astrology that, and you've heard me say it evidently, that the system doesn't want to make all new IUCs be just the same. It needs to make different types of people because diversity is a very important thing for us growing up. If we were all of the same cut with all the same attitude and we saw the world the same way, it would be a much duller place and we wouldn't learn much. It'd just be too much sameness. So it makes new IUCs to be all sorts of different personality types. And one way that it could do that would be using the time they were born and the place they were born, which are two variables that would change from time to time and person to person. And that worked very well in olden times when you didn't have, a major hospital birthing, 500 people a day, because they were in a city of, 20 million people. So suddenly you have a whole lot of people being born in the same place. So that old system isn't quite as good a system as it used to be because there's more sameness now just because of the way the culture's grown. But a long time ago, that worked really, really well. If you had a time and a place that there wasn't a whole bunch of infants being born exactly at that time and exactly at that place. So everybody was different, and all you needed was some algorithms that took time and place as variables. You put those variables of time and place into it, and the algorithm did its magic along with some random numbers and sorted out a bunch of human characteristics that you could apply then to those people. And if you could connect that with the way the stars looked and other things, then you come up with astrology. Okay, and there's other ways the system could have done that too. So just because things don't necessarily make physical sense to us doesn't mean that they don't actually work. There's a lot of things that are kind of loopy that actually do work. On the other hand, astrologers don't get most of their information out of the arrangements of planets. They get most of their information because their intent is getting data from the databases. And they use all the arrangements of planets and such to justify their information, to give it a root, to give it a cause. But they basically are getting data out of databases. When they look into the future, it's data out of the future probability database is what they're getting. And they then take that data and rearrange it according to their rules of astrology, which is why computers are not really great astrologers. They're pretty ho-hum pedestrian astrologers because the computers are not conscious and they don't get the data out of the databases like the astrologers do. So they're very mediocre astrologers, not great astrologers, even though they can do all the computations to 20 decimal places. Doesn't make them better astrologers. So that's an assortment of ideas that go with that. But I think you probably asked 2 or 3 more questions beside that. But Vanessa's going to get me if I don't quit.
That's good, Nat. Thumbs up. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tom. Moving over to Russ.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thank
Hi,
you,
Russ.
Vanessa. Yeah. Hi. Happy birthday again. Thank you, Vanessa, Titti, and especially Tom, for the great work you do. MBT could be easily proved by experiments and just noticing science around you. One of the signs, as I see it, are the remnants and relics from the past, miracles of ancient architecture, megalithic monuments, temples, like Great Pyramids, for example. Some said they are footprints of gods, i.e. products of activities of aliens or advanced ancient civilizations who had anti-gravity technologies, etc. But last year, a film called Great Pyramids Q 2019, made by Fehmi Krasniki, was shown in French. Now it has English version, which says that ancient Egyptians themselves had technology of using solar heat and magnifying glasses to make cement, concrete, and melt granite and cast it into molds to make huge blocks used to build many of the world's ancient monuments, including many pyramids. This theory, which with credit to Professor Joseph Davidovits, helps us to get rid of aliens hypothesis, helps to resolve Fermi paradox, and actually supports MBT. So my question is, what is your take on the matter, Tom?
On the matter of aliens or the matter of these big artifacts?
Monuments all around the world. There are a lot of pyramids made of big blocks and exquisitely made, carved, and there is different theories. What do you think of that?
Okay, well, you know, in my personal viewpoint is it doesn't really matter a lot how they got made. I'm not really, you know, exactly how they came to be is not all that important on my growth path, that I know the technology that was used to do it. So I've never really looked into it a whole lot because it doesn't seem to be that interesting. But it's obvious that it has been done. Somehow it has been done because there they are, you know, and we have multiple explanations for them. And I can maybe even add a little, another one of those explanations. But anyway, let me finish this thought first. The other one just amused me, but we'll get to that. They have been made, and I've seen movies, oh, this is now probably 5 years ago, that showed how the Egyptians could have made it with ramps and pulleys and animals and so on, that it was possible. They said, yes, you could do that. And they did the physics and the engineering and the calculations. And they said it was possible that they could have just made them by cutting the granite and moving the rocks. And yeah, I agree with you. You're shaking your head. I had the same feeling about that. I looked at that and I said, oh, that's a stretch. You know, that's somebody who really wants to, you know, to come to that conclusion, and they're squeezing the facts to do so. Yeah. And I haven't heard this thing about how they could actually pour them, you know, as opposed to haul them. But then they have quarries where they got the basic rock from. They know where a lot of the rock was cut from, and they can see that it was cut out in chunks. So that's an idea. But then they would have needed raw materials just to pour it. You know, so they wouldn't have had to transport great big things. They could have broken it into little pieces and transported little things, and then turned those into a slurry and then poured from them. So, you know, the quarry still would be necessary. So I don't know how all that was done. I just know that it was. It's perhaps, you know, I have this thing about, you know, inquiring egos would like to know, you know, but it's not really on my path to growing up. So I don't pay a lot of attention to it. Now I can offer one additional thing though. You know, you said that in the beginning, they thought that God did it, you know, and that was kind of the first answer, right? How was it done? Well, of course, you know, if you are a believer in God, then that's the one answer that you can say to everything. You know, how did anything happen? Well, God did it. You know, it becomes a very simple answer. Yeah. But actually, in that time when the larger consciousness system was trying to bully around the individuated units of consciousness playing in this virtual reality simulator, trying to make them behave and not be so rowdy and not be so, you know, so violent and so on, there was a lot more interaction there between the system and the people. Now, you know, I don't call the larger conscious system God, because that word often means something that's perfect, something that is always been, is not evolving, it's done, it's perfect. And the larger conscious system isn't any of those things. It's not supernatural, it's just a natural system and doing the best it can to evolve and so on. But back at that time, the system was more interactive with the people here, because it was indeed trying to bully them. Now, if the system was more interactive, could it have done something like made a pyramid? The system can do anything it wants. This is a virtual reality. It's just changing the information, and voila, you got a pyramid just because the information says it's there. and that's the information that all the people get, that it's there. We're still getting it, that it's there. So just by putting information, you can create something like that. And would that be something that was used to help nudge the people into, paying attention or something? I don't know. I mean, I'm just making stuff up here. I have no idea whether that's the case. But if that's the case, and if by God did it, they meant that Source did it, well, maybe the LCS just did that as something to show them about the power, and try to bully them into paying attention. I don't know. I never thought of that until just now. That's why I said it was a little humor. As I was talking to you, that idea kind of floated down into my mind. And I thought, well, that's amusing. Maybe God did do it after all, or not God, maybe the larger consciousness system, did do that after all. Maybe that's why it's such a big mystery. I don't know. But that could be it could be the solution. Who knows? But I also kind of say, who cares? It doesn't make a whole lot of difference in how I am and what my choices to find that one way or another. But I think it is interesting that we have these big monoliths. We have these big mysteries that have no solution, because that helps us think out of the box. And it's a real good thing. We have crop circles. And suddenly, overnight, it gets dark, no lights, no sound, nothing. And the next day, 30 acres are covered with this very precise geometric design that would take a team of 30 surveyors probably a month to lay out. If they were going to lay out that design, cut here and cut right back here. If they were going to lay that all out with string and stakes before they cut it, that's probably a month's worth of work to get it to look anywhere near as nice and perfect as they look like when you take a picture from the air. All right, how does that happen overnight in the dark? Well, people say, well, it couldn't be us because we don't know how to do that. Humans can't make that overnight in the dark. So it must be aliens, right? They jump to the conclusion that it's got to be aliens, because if it's not us, then who else but aliens? Well, it's not have to be aliens. It could just be a larger consciousness system that does something rather dramatic just to wake people up, just to kind of kick them out of their rut. Okay, explain this, guys. Give me your materialist viewpoint on how this just happened to emerge in this field overnight. You see, so the system does that. It has a history of doing those kinds of things just to wake us up, just to give us something to look at that says, I have no idea how that happened. And we, with all of our technology today, couldn't build that thing. If we had to go quarry rock and haul, 1,000 tons of rock someplace and lay them in a precise, we couldn't do that. And this is 2,000 years ago, this was done 5,000 years ago. Yeah, it's been done a long, long time ago. And it's outside of our technology. Well, it's the same with the crop circles, outside of our technology. We can't do that. We couldn't make that mark bend over those wheat stalks precisely like that overnight in the dark. So the system has a habit of doing very odd things that kind of kick people in the seat of the pants and force them to realize that there's something greater than just us, something bigger than just materialism, that there's other forces to work in the world. And it's a great wake-up call for people. So were the pyramids one of those that just appeared there and just to awe everyone at how could that possibly happen, just to open minds? I don't know, never thought of that before, but for some reason I did think of it today as just a possibility. Who knows, maybe they poured, like you say, or that guy who had him rolling those rocks over logs through a desert. I had to chuckle at that, because you put a rock that heavy on logs in a desert and the logs disappear. they go underneath the sand. It doesn't work too well. But in any case, I think some of those mysteries are just mysteries that were made to be mysteries so that we can learn something from them. And maybe that's just the answer. Maybe God did do it after all, but maybe God isn't really the God that the religions talk about. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's just a consciousness system that is not super normal at all.
Yeah, I recommend this film, Great Pyramids, K 2019.
Okay.
You will see this is something. But crop circles, exactly. This is made by LCS. Nobody can do that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. Thank
Uh-huh.
you.
Okay, Sylvia.
Hey, I just want to make one comment first, which I was just kind of struck by how awesome this is, that we're all here together from all around the globe, like sharing community. And I'm just so grateful for everybody that made this happen and everybody that showed up. I just think it's so cool. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Sylvia.
So I do have two questions. Vanessa, don't kill me. I think they're short because they're follow-ons, but if they're not short, then just answer the first one. So the first question is, when you were answering Faisal's question about the dreams, I'm aware that I don't dream very often, but when I do, I am lucid. And when bad things happen that I'm not enjoying, I just wake myself up. And I'm in your response to Faisal, I just started thinking, am I missing an opportunity here by forcing myself awake? So that's question number one. Hopefully that's a quick kind of yes or no-ish kind of answer. And then the second question was a follow-on from Titi's question about the male-female thing. And I'm just wondering, there's biology, which gives us some of these instincts, but then I'm wondering about the pattern of past lives. And, you know, if you have many, many lives as a man, but then incarnate this life as a woman in order to learn some things, how does that interact? There must be some residual there. And how does that interact with biology?
Okay.
So those are my two questions.
Okay,
But answer the first one really short so that I have time to hear the second one.
Yeah, well, I can do them both fairly short. The Vanessa's grinning, yeah. Really, Vanessa, I can do these very shortly. Okay. The first one is you can get that answer just by experimenting with it and see, you know, so don't wake yourself up and see if you can't overcome the thing that is negative. See if you can't just get to a point and find some solution to that, even if the solution is you make it all disappear. Okay, there's bad guys in a bad situation doing bad things or whatever, and you just say, no, go away. I mean, that may be one simple solution to make it all just go away. Or you can just, you know, give yourself special powers to fix it such that it works. Whatever, but some positive solution rather than, you know, just exiting, running away from it. So try that and see if you can't do that. If so, it'll be good. It'll develop something in you that isn't, you know, that gets to the point that when the going gets rough, you know, you exit. And that's probably better that you stay and work it out if you can. On the other hand, it may be the system giving you a fear test or some sort of thing just to see how you'll react to it. And it'll be much better to not run, but to stay and somehow make it be positive. And that somehow needs to be really creative, because the system will set up a situation that there's no normal way that you can fix it. Well, you have to think of abnormal ways where you can modify things or people or ideas, or you're a super counselor and you can talk to everybody and they'll all agree that Sylvia's got the right idea, and they'll stop fighting with each other. And, you know, something that you can do to make it positive would be probably a better thing to do than just wake up. Okay. So the second thing about the male female, it's probably unlikely that anybody would be a male or a female for many, many, many lifetimes. I think mostly that gets sampled a lot more both ways, you know, as you go, because again, you get stuck in a rut if you only have one perspective, and the male perspective and the female perspective are just very different, and they're different enough that you need both. And to do one for, let's say, 10 times in a row probably gets to the point that you are getting stuck in a particular viewpoint, and that's not so good. So most people aren't going to get stuck. They're going to be male and female. They're going to be different races. They're going to be, you know, as much difference as they can get, the quicker they're going to evolve. So that's, that's typically the way it is. Now, often an entity will prefer to be male or female. And, they'll tend to do that more often, but they still need to change here and there. So we do different cultures, different races, different genders, and we do it pretty thoroughly because that helps us grow. At least the system encourages that. When you're there, going to get another incarnation, and you say, well, I'm going to be a female again, and that's like your 10th time. The system probably says, really, don't you think you're getting stuck? You really need to do something else. And you could say, no, I'm going to be a female again, and you could just do that. But what you'll find then is that your evolution starts to slow down, and you're just not learning as much. And eventually you actually become aware of that. So there are probably people who do that, but that's showing that they're really not all that grown up yet because they don't really understand, how diversity is important. So as you're more grown up, you tend to be more balanced.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, that was quick. Wow, good job.
Yeah.
You did it.
Okay, George, you are next.
Hello, everyone. So, my question is about creativity and arts in general. How important is creativity, and what role do arts play in lowering the entropy of humankind and LCS? And have you, Tom, by any chance come across entities in our system who express their own creativity, if they have any, of course, through the same and or different means that we do, for example, poetry, painting, music, and so on?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, creativity is very important. And I'll try to give you a very high level answer on that because there's lots of details we could get into, but consciousness process two ways, intuitively and intellectually. Art helps us process intuitively. And in our culture, where we tend to be very dominantly intellectual, that's seen as, that's the high value thing to be. That's where the good jobs are. That's where the rewards are. And the attaboys come from that being an intellectual. We tend to neglect the intuitive part, but art speaks to our intuitive part. And if we are artists, to be artists, we need to be intuitive. A lot of the art flows from the intuitive self. That develops us intuitively. Creativity develops us intuitively. The creative thing comes from the intuitive part, not from the intellectual part. The intellectual part is not all that creative. The intuitive part is the creative part. So even if you're not an artist, but you appreciate art and you like art and you spend time looking and interacting with art, that's you developing your intuitive side, your being level side. The intuitive side is your being level. So all that's a good thing. So if we took art away, these people would almost have infantile, intuitive sides. They wouldn't have developed much at all. It's through that intuition, it's through the music. When people sit down and listen to music, that's all an intuitive connection, an emotional connection, not an intellectual connection. And as soon as they get intellectual about it, oh, look at that, the piccolos just came in. I see they're doing this in a little different time signature than the piano is. And isn't that interesting? In other words, if you pick it apart intellectually, you lose the art. You're not really appreciating the art of it. You're appreciating the technique, and you're appreciating the execution. And all of that should be appreciated, but it's not the main thing. You're missing the art. The art is on the intuitive side. So that is our main connection in our culture with our intuitive side. If it wasn't for the arts, we would be more like computers than people. You know, we'd get lost in our intellects. So art is a very important part, and creativity would kind of go to zero. We'd have a really hard time being creative if we didn't also have art that keeps that intuitive side oiled and alive and working. So that is very important. Even if you're a scientist and you get creative in your concepts and your ideas, well, that's coming out of the intuitive side. And if you're locked into your intellect, you just don't get those creative ideas. They don't happen. You'll take somebody else's creative ideas and maybe progress them faster and further, but you just don't have any of your own because your intuitive side has atrophied. So art and creativity are fundamentally important because they're fundamentally how we process on the intuitive side, on the being level side, as opposed to the intellectual side. So it's a very fundamental thing. It's not just something we do because it's fun and it's pleasing, but it's a fundamental, necessary part of who we are, is to be creative, to be inventive, and to be artists in however way we make our art. You know, our art may be business or it may be, you know, something else, but you can apply creativity or art to anything. So does that answer your question, George?
Yes, of course. And second part, have you come across any entities in our system?
Yes, I have. Not in our system. I don't know. Entities in our system, not a lot of entities walking around in our system, but well, I won't say that. You know, it depends on what you mean. If you mean our system, the one I defined in the book, all the...
Yes, that's
yeah, I mean. That's the one you mean, not just our system like this virtual reality. Okay, good. The big picture, our system. Yes, I have been to other places where, one I've talked about in the past, where basically communication was done more through music. It was more a musical... You know, it's not like necessarily like opera where everybody sings to each other. You know, it wasn't like that, but more musical than that, really. And it was very different than we do here. So it's hard to describe, but the communications were not voice so much as music. But this also was a place that was entirely telepathic. They didn't necessarily have speech, you know, from one person to another through the air like we do. Their communications were very telepathic. So with telepathy, you're not stuck with one note at a time. You can do you can do a whole orchestra all at once with telepathy. You know, you get paragraphs and chapters all at one time. So they were able to express themselves and ideas in what I interpreted as sound and soundscapes and music. Now, I wasn't necessarily a real good interpreter of exactly what all that meant, but I could tell that that's how they communicated with each other. It was a very interesting place. So yes, I think art is important anywhere because art is, like I say, it's fundamental. It's a fundamental part of consciousness. I mean, fully half of what we are is intuitive. And the other half is intellectual. And that intuitive half is all about art. It's all about, you know, feeling. So that's a very important part of being conscious. And because all of the places in our system and even outside our system, it's all about consciousness everywhere and consciousness evolution. That's the key idea that's driving all of it. They're all pieces of the same consciousness system we're pieces of. So their art may be different than ours, but it's still going to be them exercising their intuitive and being level side, their version of creativity.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great. So I do have one last question. I don't know if you have time though, Tom. Do you have to go because we're 35 minutes over?
Vanessa, you've been the leader of this thing, and I guess Lynda was the what got it
Initiator.
going. Yeah, she was the initiator. She was the idea. She was the intuitive artist who came up with this as an art form. And you are the intellectual side that's trying to keep us in time and do all those things. So I would hate for you to miss out on your question. So go ahead. I always have time for one question from Vanessa. Because Vanessa always says, I have just this one question.
No, this time it really is. This one really is. Yeah. And I was going to say, everybody, a lot of you, thank you for being grateful. And TT is the one who organized all this. So TT, yeah, TT is the mastermind behind it all.
I see.
Yeah. So the question is, and I've asked you this before, I usually ask you like once every couple of years. So I think it's about time that I ask again. And others could probably relate because I'm a very average level IUOC. So others may be able to relate to whatever answer you give. So I've heard you say before that you don't really know the limitations you have because they're your limitations. So they're your blind spots. You don't know what's holding you back. And the only way to really find them is if you can kind of turn to somebody who doesn't share the same limitations because they have a bigger picture. So that's you. You have a very big picture. And I'd like to ask you, what limitation is there that's preventing me from evolving into my full potential and reducing my entropy? And don't say you're perfect just the way you are. You can tell me what it is.
Why would I ever say that?
You can tell me the truth. I might cry, but that's okay. I am pregnant now too, so my emotions are a little crazy, but it's okay. Don't take it personally if I cry.
Well, it's not true that you can't discover your own limitations. You can discover those limitations. You can't see them directly because you don't know what you don't know. That's true. And you're not aware of what else you could be if you've never been that. So you're right. You have a big blind spot there. But the way that you can tell your limitations is the same way that you can tell your fears, because it is your fears that create those limitations. So if you had no fear, you'd have no limitations. All of your limitations have to do with your fears. And as you've probably heard me say, you can find your fears by looking at your feelings. If you ever feel negative, if you feel anxiety, if you feel upset, if you feel annoyed, if you feel this isn't working for such and such a reason, if you complain a lot, if you're basically negative, all that negativity is only there because you have a fear. Or multiple fears. If you didn't have any fear, that negativity wouldn't exist. It wouldn't be there. So look at your feelings and associate that feeling with something that's going on in your life. That's, if it's negative, then we call that you have buttons. People push your buttons and they make you feel negative, right? It's not your fault. They make you feel negative. Well, that's not true, of course. You choose to feel negative because you have a fear, and that button is attached to that fear. And when that fear resonates, you push back. You get angry, you get upset. You have these negative moments because of that fear. So just look for the things that stress you out. Look for the things that make you feel bad, and look at them. I mean, some things will make you feel bad. If somebody's just really, abuses you, well, that'll make you feel bad. And it's not your fear that's the problem. You need to leave. You need to go someplace else, right? That's the problem. But you know what I mean when I talk about negative feelings that just kind of come up. And it's not because you're in a horrible situation and being treated horribly. It's because somebody's resonated with one of your fears, and that brings up the negativity. Well, that's where you look, because it's not likely to be a thing that is wrong. Oh, if you just fix this thing, Vanessa, you would be almost perfect. Almost now, just almost. But it's not like that. There's not just this one thing to fix. It's more complicated than that. You have fears, and then you have other, fear creates more fear. And there's probably a tangle of various fears together. that tend to create problems for people, not just a single monolithic fear that is the root of all your problems. It's probably a tangle of all sorts of things, experiences, fears, things that happened to you when you were little, things that happened to you, you know, later in life, whatever, that give you insecurities or give you not good enoughs or things that trigger you. So in any case, look at those. That's where you'll find it. And that's much better than me trying to tell you, you know, what's wrong with you, because I never tell anybody what's wrong with them. That's not a good thing for me to do. That doesn't really help you, because you can't deal with that. That's just abstraction to you, and there's no way to get your hands around that and actually make any use of it. It's much better if you see it, you have to come to it, you have to find it, and then you have to deal with it. And just knowing what it is intellectually really isn't that helpful.
Yeah, can I give you just a short little example? Because it's strange. It's like, I have some people in my life who are amazing, like my mom and my partner, and they're always like,
Vanessa, are you asking two questions?
no, I'm just giving you more clarity.
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
But okay, so it's really weird because like I have some people who are super supportive and loving and kind in my life, and I get frustrated with them, like more so than other people who are like mean. And I'm like, why am I so frustrated with them? Like they're so nice and kind, and always frustrated with them.
Okay, I can tell you why that probably is. You get frustrated with them because you feel that you are not what you should be. In a way, you feel not good enough. You're not what you should be around those people. They have it more together than you do. And because they are nice and they are kind, and you think, well, they're more kind and nicer than I am. I wouldn't be that nice and that kind. If I traded places and somebody was like me, I'd push back. I wouldn't be that kind. So you feel bad about yourself. And when you feel bad about yourself, you instantly blame that on somebody else. You focus that and say, oh, so-and-so makes me feel bad, or I feel angry when I'm around these people. But most anger like that, most upset, most feeling of ill ease is because you feel bad about yourself. And as soon as you do that, ego starts looking for someone to blame that feeling on. You know, somebody makes me feel this way. It's because they point out to you your own weaknesses, your own failures. So when you see them being nice, it makes you feel bad about yourself. As soon as you feel bad about yourself, you start finding a way to justify that bad feeling. Well, yeah, they're nice, but they're boring. They're not this, they're not exciting. They don't do this and they don't do that. And, you know, you start to justify it in some way. You'll find ways to justify it, but that's really not what it is. It's just you being disappointed with yourself.
Right, and projecting it onto them. Because then I pick them apart. I'm like, oh, there you go, being so perfect again. Like, I do that. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? Why am I such a bitch?
Yeah, because you're saying, there you go, making me feel bad about myself again. But they don't make you feel anything. You feel bad about yourself because that's you. So that's what's going on.
Makes sense. Thank you. That was a really helpful answer. And thank you everybody for being here. I know that some of you wanted to do another round of questions, but we do have to let Tom go, and we will be doing this again next year. So there will be more to come for our amazing volunteer team. Anybody else that's out there who would like to volunteer and join this amazing team, please reach out to us. We'll put the email in the comments there, and you can join this incredible team.
Tom Campbell here. I and MBT Events hope you liked this video. We now have well over 1,000 hours of free video on this user-friendly, ad-free YouTube channel. Though these videos are free to our viewers, they represent many thousands of hours in production and editing, and many thousands of dollars invested in video and audio equipment, along with the required computers and software to store and process the raw video into finished products. So far, all of this content has been funded directly out of our own pockets. Be assured, we will always continue to do what we can. It's our life, our purpose, a labor of love that we will continue to pursue as best we can. However, those pockets are not as deep as they used to be. Thus, we are now seeking to augment our resources with support from our viewers. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our newly created Patreon account or through a one-time donation. The links are in the description below. Thank you.